assigned to a unit known as the 509th Composite Group, and that unit was trained to deliver the atomic bomb. The commander of that unit was Colonel Paul Tibbets, who had been a B-17 bomber pilot in Europe, and it was a B-29 test pilot. He oversaw the training of the crews, oversaw the modification of the B-29s, including this one, and then led that unit from the United States to Tinian Island in June 1945. They conducted a couple more months of training, and then following approval from President Truman, early on the morning of August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb known as Little Boy was placed in the forward bomb bay, which you see forward of that white dome. If you look closely, that white dome, which covers radar used by the navigator, that forward bomb bay is where Little Boy was located. 12 crew members on board, and here's a photograph of the crew standing in front of the Enola Gay before they took off from Tinian Island on the morning of August 6, 1945. Now, there were 12 crew members on board. This is not the complete crew, but it's a majority of the crew. Paul Tibbets, the commander, is in the back center row right there. That's Paul Tibbets. He was the group commander. He was the pilot in command of this mission, and the airplane is named after his mother, Enola Gay Tibbets. So he had the name of his mother painted on the nose of the airplane the day before they took off for Japan. So as I mentioned, the bomb was loaded in the forward bomb bay, weighed about 10,000 pounds. The enriched uranium had an explosive force of well over 12,000 tons of TNT. In addition to the normal crew, there were also 2 weapons officers that were assigned from the Manhattan Project. Their job was to arm the bomb once the airplane was airborne from Tinian Island. So they took off from Tinian Island with Little Boy inside the forward bomb bay. It was not armed at that time. They waited until they were airborne and away from Tinian before those 2 weapons officers climbed into the bomb bay, inserted the detonators and the fuses, and then they climbed up to an altitude of 30,000 feet. Now, a B-29 can be pressurized. So that means it could fly at altitudes above 30,000 feet, and the crew did not require oxygen masks or heated flight suits like you see in film from B-17s and B-24s in Europe. One of the unique features of the B-29, the fact it was a pressurized bomb. So 31,000 feet, cruising altitude, 6 hours after takeoff, as they approached the main target, the primary target, Hiroshima, in southern Japan, the pilots, including Paul Tibbets, turned over control of the airplane to the bombardier. And if you look in the nose of the airplane closely, the bomb site is located right there. That's a Norden bomb site. Basically a sophisticated analog computer which was used by the bombardier to release the bombs as accurately as possible. So that bombardier actually flew the airplane using that bomb site during its final bomb run. 31,000 feet above the center of Hiroshima, bomb bay doors opened up. Bombardier released Little Boy. Once it was free of the bomb bay doors closed, and immediately after that, the 2 pilots took over control of the airplane back from the bombardier, put it in a steep diving bank, and accelerated to get as far away as possible from Hiroshima. They were about 10 miles away when the atomic bomb detonated 1,800 feet above the ground over the center of Hiroshima. That was far enough that they were not damaged or by the blast or by the radiation, but they certainly felt the shock wave. Very turbulent passage of that shock wave, but the plane survived, the crew survived. They returned to Tinian Island 12 hours after takeoff. Now, I mentioned the bomb detonated above the ground. That was by design, designed as an airburst to maximize the radius of destruction. If it had hit the ground and then detonated, much of the force would have been just used to make a big wave in the center of the city. I'll wait till this is over. Sorry about that. Bomb detonated above the ground, 1,800 feet above the ground. No injuries to the crew of the Enola Gay, no damage to the airplane. They returned to Tinian Island 12 hours after takeoff, round-trip mission. Now, the Japanese did not surrender, and so 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. Now, it was dropped not by this airplane, but by a sister airplane that was known as the Boxcar. And that bomb, as I mentioned, was the plutonium design, nicknamed Fat Man. It was a much larger pumpkin-shaped bomb, and the nickname Fat Man came from the fact that it was nicknamed after Winston Churchill. The British Prime Minister during World War II, if you recall, was a very large, rotund individual. So, August 9th, Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki. Japanese did surrender a week later, August 14th, 1945. Then these airplanes that were part of the 509th Composite Group were returned to the United States, and eventually the Enola Gay was transferred to the Smithsonian in the 1950s, and the boxcar is on display at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. So what you see today is the result of a 19-year-long restoration that began in 1984 and culminated in 2003 when the airplane was brought out here via truck, flatbed truck from the restoration facility at that time, which was in Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., not far from Andrews Air Force Base. So.
I think it was more so that
This is Enola Gay, the flight that dropped little boy. The nuclear bomb there in Japan on August 6th, 1942 or 1945. This is the inside of Enola Gay from the pilot's view.
All right, very quickly, because we can't stand in front of this Boeing airplane over here on the other side of the group, I want to spend a few minutes talking about it. This is a Boeing 367-80. That's the model number of this airplane. And it first flew in 1954, and it was originally developed by Boeing as a prototype for the Air Force's first aerial jet tanker, the KC-135 Stratoliner, which entered service in the late 50s. But it was such a successful design that Boeing then used it as the basis for the famous Boeing 707 airline. So the first successful American jet airliner, the Boeing 707, which entered service in the late 50s, was developed for this airplane, the Dash 8. Now this never carried passengers. It was strictly a test airplane for Boeing until it was retired by Boeing in the early 70s. But what's interesting about this airplane, in 1955, it made a very unusual, one-of-a-kind flight. The pilot was Tex Johnson, who was a Boeing test pilot, not Tex. Modifications.
And one of the guys that was sitting at the desk when we started this worked.
This is the other side of Enola Gay. This is Enola Gay, the position where the pilots, the crew used to sit. Unnecessary was
Sí, sentí que se sacude, sí. No sostuve, sí, es.